I'm Steven Talbot of Steven Talbot Consultancy, and you are listening to the Academy's Developing Practice podcast.
Hello, in this episode, myself, Matthew Davis, an organisational developer, and Alex Owen, an academic developer, sat down with Steven Talbot of Steven Talbot Consultancy. We discussed over the last year how Steven successfully moved his highly engaging classroom development into a solely online experience, while maintaining his excellent feedback from participants. We hope you enjoy. Well, Steven, we're really pleased to be speaking with you today. But before we get into the podcast, can you give us a little bit about your background and how you arrived at the position that you're in now?
Yes, I can. I used to be a teacher. I was a drama teacher, which is why I'm so dramatic. And it's equipped me with lots of skills to get up and speak in front of an audience and not be fearful of it. And that was something that when I was a drama teacher, I was always teaching the children and the young people that you might not go on to be an actor. There's loads and loads of transferable skills from this course and from what you're learning, and you can just use it in everyday life. And it was that was my first sort of thing. I then started teaching people with learning disabilities and autism. And when I first graduated university, I went to Hull University and did drama. And when I graduated, I went to Newcastle Underline Job Centre to sign on, and I'd never signed on before. I didn't quite know what it was, and I went in and they said, "Oh, we've got jobs going here." And I said, "Oh, have you?" And you can't say no, can you? You're searching for work. So I never got to sign on because they offered me a job there and then. So the next day I was interviewing people to work in Morrison's. And the reason I'm telling you this is because I set myself a target that I would only ever do a job for 3 years. And no matter how much I love it or hate it, I'm going to stick at it. I'm going to do it for 3 years and then I'll move on. And that's what I've always done. So I've got a very varied background. So I started off as a drama teacher, and then I went into teaching people with learning disabilities. Then I became a program leader. Then I became a manager for people with learning disabilities. Then I went into sexual health. So I'm an expert on chlamydia. Ask me anything. Yes, I went to teenage pregnancy prevention. I then became a training manager for a housing charity, and I was the principal of the Brides Futures Academy. Then I went back to the council where I met you, Matt.
You did, yeah.
And I was working in learning and development, and I brought motivational interviewing into Stoke Council. And it was working at Stoke Council that really sort of gave me the chutzpah to go and do it myself and go it alone.
So what was the thinking then behind I'm going to change jobs every 3 years? Because
I wanted to just have a enjoyable life with lots and lots and lots of different things to do. So I am easily bored, and I want to be inspired all of the time. And that's what I want to do to other people. I want to inspire them all the time. And so if you are, some people, they love being in a job for a very long time and they don't get inured to it. I get bored, and some jobs I've left. So when I worked with you, I left 3 years to the day that I started.
Did you? I didn't realize that.
I did. And I can I tell you the reason why I left?
Absolutely.
So I went to my friend Fiona's dad's funeral, and I had like an epiphany, not like a religious epiphany, but I had an epiphany of, they showed a film of his life, and he'd been a bank manager and he'd worked in banking all his life. And then he just gave it all up, he went to Keele University and did a psychology degree. And he was one of the loveliest people I've ever met. and he was a real character, but he was so helpful and kind and just wanted to make a difference to the world. And as they showed that film, it was like a hallelujah as the light came in the church and went across the screen. And I sat and thought, yeah, I need to go and do something like that. I need to just go and do this for myself. People kept telling me, you're too good for this, Stephen. You need to be doing this yourself. So and being from, as you know, being from North Staffordshire, near to Stoke-on-Trent, we get to metaphorically, or whichever way I want to put it, we get punched in the face, don't we, if we say that we're marvelous at anything. It's sort of knocked out of you. You can't say that you're any good, and I don't like that. And I'm always saying to young people when I'm teaching, because I still do stuff with young people, I still say to them, like when I'm teaching a drama group, don't be self-deprecating, because when you're self-deprecating and you put yourself down, the next person who goes for that job interview or the next person who goes for that audition, they're not going to do that, and they will get the job and they will get the part. And it's just because we are from the North Midlands where we deflate everything. So, you know, I'll say, well, yeah, it wasn't bad, was it? It was all right. And what I mean is it was fantastic, but we stop ourselves from doing it. That's why I love coming to Liverpool, because generally people in Liverpool, when I'm trying, they don't do that.
A classic example, Stephen, is Matt and I have been shortlisted for an award recently for this very podcast. And Matt is going around telling everyone that we're not going to get it. And I keep going around telling everyone we are.
Yes, I'm with you.
Point.
I'm with you, Alex. So I would be saying, oh, I've been nominated for an award. I think we stand a really good chance. But 10 years ago, I'd be like Matt saying, oh, well, this is all a bit pointless, isn't it?
Even watching him through the screen now on Zoom, he looks mortified that I've even raised this point. Nominated, and he's looking at me to say move on quickly, which I will do.
Right.
So you've ended up in terms of learning and development. So can you tell us a little bit about the motivation behind you wanting to deliver the various programs that you now offer?
Well, I've worked with lots of different types of people. So lots of vulnerable people, people who are at risk of harm, people who haven't got very many life choices, and those sort of things. I've grown up in a very working class area, and I was very lucky in that my mum and dad both had jobs and loved me and loved my brother and brought us up properly and stuff. And I'm aware that people around me weren't necessarily having that sort of upbringing. And I wanted to always just sort of make a difference to those people who don't necessarily have a voice. And my training is about equipping people with the skills to be more positive, more inspired, more motivated, how to inspire other people to change. And it's just, that's something I'm just really passionate about, and it goes across all walks of life.
So what is it specifically that you enjoy about being a developer? So if that's your vision for what you're doing, have you got some stories about maybe some of the results of the work that you've done?
Well, yeah, because I go out, my unique thing is because I'm a filmmaker and I make my own films, I go out and I interview clients, service users, customers, whatever you want to call them, people. And I go out and I get their life story. So when I was working for the local authority, people were a bit taken aback because I would say, right, I want to go out with the housing officers then. Let me go out with the social workers and the, you know, whoever it was, just go out and meet the actual real customers. And what was amazing was that the customers oftentimes would say how fabulous their workers were and how they'd listen to them and how they'd really supported them. And then now and again, you got the, you know, it was an absolute nightmare and they didn't listen. And I make those films as well, where they reflect one way or the other, really.
I think that's a really important point there, because you were the first person I knew who would go out there and you would use the end user's voice in your development. And I know you've talked about, you know, the motivational things that you do, and the aim to inspire people. But I think some of the most impactful work that you did during the time that I was working with you in local government was the bit around alcohol misuse and drug misuse, and really highlighting some of those stories who are living in those places. You know, the interview you did with the guy with the bottle of cider at his side was very, very powerful.
Craig, who's been alcohol free for many, many years now. And that was sparked off. But I remember going out and doing that interview with him. And the housing officer I went with said, "How did you get all of that out of him?" And I said, "Well, when you've done the training with me, you'll be able to get that all out of him." And that housing officer, Steve, his name is amazing with people. And he did absolutely engage with the training on how to use those active listening skills and not judge, criticize, or blame people for their life choices, and just listen and try and understand what's brought them to this situation, and not then throw a load of advice at them about how they can change. Instead, think about with them how they could change themselves. What could you actually do? And he worked very closely with Craig, and Craig did absolutely brilliant. And it's not funny, but not that long ago, I saw Craig in a bus station, and he's working. He's got a full-time job now. He hasn't returned to drinking, and he didn't want to speak to me. And I don't mind that at all, because I remind him of a time when things weren't brilliant. And he just sort of nodded and smiled, and he sort of put up his hand to say, "No, don't. It's fine." And then there was Paula as well, if you remember Paula, who just did amazing. And Paula had been someone who had drug and alcohol misuse in her life. She'd been a sex worker and had her children removed. And the local authority supported her for years and years and years, but they didn't necessarily equip her with the skills to do stuff for herself. And I loved that woman. I just thought she was amazing, because she got off drugs and alcohol herself. I went to make a follow-up film with her, and she never, ever left the flat, never went out. And when we arrived, she wasn't there. So we sort of panicked and thought, why is she not answering the door? She never, ever goes out. And then she appeared behind us, and we were like, "Where have you been?" And she said, "I've gone and get some new teeth." And we'd inspired her to go out, and she would never have done that before. And that was telling her story in that film. She'd had a horrendous life. And yes, she has lapsed since. She hasn't relapsed, she's lapsed. And each time she's lapsed, she's called her housing officer or her support worker and said, "I had a drink." Before, she'd have vanished.
Mm.
But no, she trusted that the support workers wouldn't judge her. And she's done great. And she was one of the first people to contact me when my mum died. I'll always remember that. Yeah. And she was just, because she just wanted to be a mum more than anything, and life got in the way.
So would you say that one of the things that you love most about being a developer is getting alongside people and truly hearing their stories? Is that really exciting?
I've recently done a film which is on my website. Check it out. And it's 5 people talking about empathy fatigue. And one of them is a doctor from the hospital who's explaining just how exhausted beyond human endurance she is. And she's still going in every day. But she's just seen more and more COVID-19 cases, more and more. And then when she goes out, she sees people not socially distancing, and they're in the supermarket, and she wants to scream at them. She doesn't. But that was really interesting, because she was very different. So, she isn't necessarily a vulnerable person, but she was someone who wanted to tell her story. I met with a man from the army as well who'd got PTSD, and awful things had happened to him when he was in the army. And when he came out of the army, all people asked him was, "How many people have you killed? How many people have you killed?" And he became quite violent towards people if they asked him that. And we've worked together He's helped me to do a film, and he no longer reacts to that. Because he said to me, so when we did the interview, he said, "Why haven't you asked me the question?" And I said, "What question's that?" And he said, you know what everyone asks. And I said, "Well, what do you want me to ask you?" And he said, "Well, you haven't asked it me." And I said, "I know what you're talking about. You want me to ask how many people you've killed." I said, "But I don't want to know that. I want to know about your life." And he couldn't get over how many people he'd killed. He couldn't live with himself. You know, so that they were really interesting. But yeah, the empathy fatigue one, though, has got lots of people on it, all different. I've got a teacher who walked out of his job, and I know him personally, and he couldn't bear being observed. He had a very bullying manager, and never got any positive feedback, and was such a really good teacher, but just gave it all up. Now works in a children's home.
We've spoken with lots of people on the podcast since March, who have all spoken about the impact of COVID, and you've obviously just mentioned it there with that doctor. It obviously threw a real spanner in the works in terms of how we go about our role, and particularly you, because your classroom development is unique from as far as what I've seen out there. It's highly, highly engaging. So what have you done to try and pivot that to online delivery? And have you managed to replicate it, or are you finding there's still issues?
Well, my thing is that because of being a teacher, I'm very much about kinesthetic, hands-on things. So, you know, adults love it. You give them a bit of Velcro and they're happy. Sticking on the answers, thing. And you might think, oh, it's all a bit naff, but people like it. They like to be able to touch the stuff. And that was a concern for me, that, you know, I can't use my famous Play-Doh games and the laminates and all that sort of stuff and the board games I've created. So I just thought about it. And then I utilize Zoom, which I find the best of the bunch, really. And you taught me about Mural, which not a lot of people have heard of. I have used Teams as well. I don't find that quite as interactive. I can still send people off to work into pairs, though, in Zoom, especially in small groups. What I do is I've created the same sort of learning tools. And what I do is I either email it out to them, or I've created a little game on whatever it is. I still use my films. I still use lots and lots of hands-on stuff. It's just that they're doing it on their own at the other end of a screen, still working with other people. So the feedback has been great. Yesterday, actually, I was teaching some people from Birmingham Council, and they were like, "This is like better than being in a classroom." And they loved it, because I was just getting them to, they're quite small groups. I don't have any more than 10 or 12 because it just becomes unmanageable. But they were able to go off in little groups and work on the tasks I'd give them to do. And they still came back and said how much they enjoyed it.
That's really interesting, that about the size of the group in particular. Obviously, we've got lecturers who are having to look after a lot of students online in sessions. So have you found that when you've gone over, I don't know, say 15, that you've run into issues, or you haven't managed to get the engagement?
Because I've got two screens, so I've always got the screen where I can see them as well as the presentation or whatever they're actually doing. And when you've got 18 people, so a good teacher can always you can find those learners who are hiding and are slipping behind and are rather passive people and not the ones who want to speak up. When they're on a screen, you just see their face. And when you've got 18 people on a screen, it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and you can't pick up, can you, on those human nuances that maybe they're a bit lost, or maybe they don't really want to work with that person, or they don't like her over there, or Sandra's not very nice and Paul isn't, and Imran's a right git, and that's all that sort of stuff you get on training. So I just insisted really that it was a maximum of, I've actually said for some it's 14, because if they're on Zoom, they do lots of activities in small groups, so it's fine. But it's just that thing of the body language is missing, isn't it, behind the screen?
Yeah.
And we're all crying out, aren't we, for intimacy and just being able to touch somebody else. I think it's just shown how really important it is to us all. I'm very tactile. I don't go around grabbing older people on training. I'm massively inappropriate. But like when I do autism training, when I'm talking about being on the spectrum, I often talk about people who can't see the mores and graces of everyday life. So that they don't understand the hidden rules of society. And part of that is, as I'm talking about it, I'll stand really close to someone on training, like really too close, and I'll invade their body space. And then I'll go right close to their face and go, "Did you get that? Did you understand it?" And generally they're not like, in the classroom, they will go, yeah. And then everyone else laughs because they get it, like what I'm doing. But obviously behind a screen, I can't do that. So that sort of the more physical approach doesn't work. It still works. I do miss the classroom though. I just miss.
Yeah, I bet.
You know, when it comes to break time, everyone closes their screen and go off and do what they want, don't they? Well, not everyone. When I did Staffordshire County Council recently, that was lovely because at break time, they all kept their cameras on and all talking to each other. They didn't know each other. They were all from different departments. They were just very conducive to sharing stories. That they rushed off to make a cup of tea and came back to talk to each other. And then yesterday I was delivering compulsive hoarding training, trapped and drowning in my things. And 3 of the people at the end stayed behind because they were all from different organisations that could help this person. So that was great. Wow. It was a lovely networking thing. That's through Voices of Stoke, where they're funded by the big lottery to basically deliver training about lived experience and look at services based on how service users and residents of Stoke have used them and the sort of barriers that they've come across. And Voices of Stoke are just a great organisation that are working on how do we get rid of those boundaries, and these, you know, we need to listen more to the voice of Stoke, the everyday people, not so much the professionals. Let's listen to what the expert citizens have got to say about life. And let's see how we can turn services around.
So, Stephen, you've been to our university and delivered some development sessions, and you always get incredibly positive feedback, with some of the comments saying that it's the best development session that they've ever attended. Can you tell us what your secret is?
Well, no, because other people will pinch it, won't they? They'll pinch mine. Yeah. So, when I was commissioned to do, so basically the training was for people to deal with potential aggression. That was the training I was asked to deliver. And that has been, anecdotally, we know, don't we, that there's been an upswing in aggression from some people, especially some people think that they get their own way by thumping the table, demanding, swearing, those sort of things. And so when I was first commissioned, I then contacted several departments. I spoke to members of staff. I spoke to a few students as well. And then I created the training based on that findings. And then what Matt sent me some stuff as well. So I made quite a funny film about parking, which everybody laughed at. Everyone loved Nana Joan, who gets very annoyed because she can't park when she comes to see her grandson at the university. And then that was based on the fact that lots of people turn up to the wrong university in Liverpool and shout at you because why haven't you got your signs right? And your members of staff have to say, well, that child doesn't come to here. You're talking about another university. And sometimes they didn't tell them in the best way. So I knew about that. So I created the training bespoke for you. I made it full of anecdotes that reflect in-jokes that are going on, because I like to think that training needs to be, I always say this, it's like the BBC. It needs to inform, educate, and entertain. Because when you entertain people, they remember it. So you don't just say in 2 weeks' time, you walk down the corridor and you say, "Hey, Matt, what did you learn from that training?" Well, it was all right. It was funny, wasn't it? You tend to get, "Oh, well, yeah, I've started to do this," or what was that bit he said about so and so. They remember it because they had fun. So I always make it fun. There are serious points to be made, obviously, but you can always make education fun and informative and engaging. And that's my thing. So I never talk, even though I'm doing a lot of talking with you two today. I don't talk for longer than 3 or 4 minutes without giving them an activity to do. I'm always involving them. I don't read slides verbatim off the board. I've got a very good memory. So once people have introduced themselves, I can remember everybody's name. So I'll go, "Right, Alex, so what do you think about so-and-so?" And then people are alert then on training because they straight away, they think, "Oh, he's got a good memory. He's going to pull me out. So you don't get surface learning. You get more deeper meta learning going on in the class because people are enthused as well. So I just, happy learners learn.
So I guess in terms of your methodology there, whether it's developers or academics, there's lots of hints and tips there, aren't there? I'm hearing from you, there's storytelling, there's keeping people engaged.
Yeah.
There's lots of anecdotes in what you're saying, that kind of avoiding surface learning, but
Indeed.
actually getting people to think things through.
Yeah. And be mindful of those passive learners, those people who don't like talking in front of other people. And Matt might remember this tale. Matt came to observe me back, this was 2015, might have been 2016. He came to observe me delivering managing conflict training when we worked together. And there was a man from the council who came on that training who had a speech impediment. And everyone had to introduce themselves. And I allowed him to have as long as it took for him to introduce himself. And I didn't say anything, and I didn't roll my eyes, and I didn't look at anybody else. And the whole room gave him respect for it. And then later on, there was an activity they have to do where it was matching the pairs type activity. And he ended up taking over the table and he stopped stuttering because he was absolutely engaged in it. And after, I remember Matt saying to me, "Oh, Stephen, I got really worried for you there because I didn't know how long he was going to take to speak." But I gave him, I built his self-efficacy a bit, didn't I? The belief he could actually do it. And what was lovely is at the end of the session, he came to me and he got a bit tearful. And he said, "Often people answer for me and they fill in for me," and said, "And you never did it." And I said, "And did you notice nobody else did on the training?" It's because if you're pro-social, people start to replicate you, don't you? So if you're the person at the front of the class, you're demonstrating pro-social behavior, other people start to replicate it.
Yeah, that is definitely something that you do really well in the classroom. You're always demonstrating sort of best practice, aren't you? And you've got a lot of anecdotes, you've got a lot of experience.
Well, I turn up at 7:30, don't I?
Oh yeah, you're very early. That is one thing.
I check all the technology. I check everything. Yeah,
but it's not just about that, though. I mean,
it isn't. No.
I talk about. I mean, the last time you were at Liverpool, you explained to the group that the reason why you were wearing a badge, and the badge was to signal to people who were lonely that they could actually talk to you. And then obviously that opened up a whole conversation in the group about, "Oh, I didn't know that existed. What a wonderful idea." So you're always demonstrating that. So I guess that leads me into my next question, which is, a lot of your benefit is in the classroom. Where you're probably the best at is in the classroom. I know you've got great video editing techniques and things like that. But where do you see yourself in 2021? Do you think you'll be back in the classroom, or actually are you happy to be delivering online because of the safety?
I am enjoying doing online. I am. And I'm loving the fact that the feedback hasn't dipped. I like to think my claim to fame is it's 100% positive. So I always get, constructive feedback, and people generally are enthused. But I've never had negative feedback. It happened once, which I know you know about, which is I don't mind you using this. You can mention this if you like. So somebody once wrote, enjoyed the training. Shame you've got such a puffy voice. And yeah, and that was me delivering equality and diversity training. That was the irony. And at the time, there were 18 people on training. 17 people had written their name on the feedback form. And someone who me and Matt worked with, who was she was our manager at the time, said, well, I haven't got me Miss Marple work this one out, have I? And we just laughed. And they offered me counselling. No, I love my puffy voice. It's fine. If that's what he wants to describe it as, I'm a very proud gay man. I don't care what you think about my voice. That's the only time I've ever had negative comments. Yes, I do miss the classroom and I hope I get back into it. And I also know that actually now it does work just as well on Zoom and Teams, things like that. I do prefer being with people. I think that's because I'm more of an activist who likes to be out there doing it. I hate being in hotels though, so it's been nice.
Yeah, so there's swings and roundabouts there, isn't there?
Yeah. Sleep in my own bed every night.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steven. There's loads in there for us to think about and reflect on. We like to finish each podcast with 3 or 4 take-home tips that the listeners can reflect on in terms of their personal practice. So you've already given us loads already, but is there anything that you could kind of summarize for us in terms of things that we could think about, that we could reflect on, adapt and modify our practice as a result of as well?
Number one, what I always say to everyone, the best bit of advice is never listen to advice. It's the best advice I was ever given. What I mean is unsolicited advice. Remember, you're the expert in your life and you probably will know the answer. And if you don't, then you go and search out the advice. Don't just have people around you who throw in advice all the time. Stephen Covey's got that famous quote, some people listen with the intention to just respond and some people listen with the intention to understand. And oftentimes people will be talking about their issues. So like when I was, I got talking to a few students they were in a certain department at Liverpool, and they said they'd been struggling with their studies a little bit, and the person they'd spoken to had almost urged them not to really worry about it. You'll be all right. You'll be fine. And it's just negating somebody's feelings, isn't it? If they'd have explored that with them, don't offer people advice. I mean, if you just say everything will be all right, you don't have people at the other end of Samaritans saying, what you moaning for? It'll be sunny tomorrow. You'll have a lovely life. No, they listen, don't they? Use those active listening skills that we're all born with. We've all got the capacity to listen, to understand, not just respond. So number one, I just say, best bit of advice, don't listen to advice. The other thing, I did jot this down. I am a big Doctor Who fan. So yes, and something I always used to say to people, especially say it was, I think I did something similar with some of your troops, which was when some of the managers said to me what they wanted on training, I would also come back to them with some things that I thought they needed. And that goes back to a quote from Doctor Who, where the TARDIS got to speak to the Doctor and said, I might not take you where you always want to go. I always take you where you need to go. And I love that quote. And I think that's important. So do listen to people, do listen to all those departments and what they want. And also bring in your own expertise of these are the things I think you need as well. So for instance, when I was first asked to do managing conflict, there was a mention of just a couple of people were saying no one's ever taught us how to do breakaway techniques and I said, well, when you get to the point where you need to break away from someone, you've already lost, haven't you really? So I don't deliver breakaway techniques because all you have is that voice in your ears. So that's it. That's how you're going to calm the situation, not by tasering people and learning how to break their thumbs, And something that I do very much now that has had a huge impact on my life is I think about what influence do I have over this situation that's making me anxious or is affecting me, and is it just a concern? If it's a concern, I just put it aside, and I don't watch much of the news anymore. I used to be obsessed with watching the news. I watch it once a day. I am abreast of what's going on, and the whole COVID situation, there is nothing I can do about it. So I have no influence over that situation. And for young people, for students, I used to say that all the time. Think about what influence you've got over what you're worrying about. And if you haven't, it sounds like you're poo-pooing it. And really, if it is a concern and there's nothing you can do about it, let it go. Water off a duck's back. Let it go.
Brilliant. I think that's a really nice point to end on, particularly for all of us working in higher education. Thanks so much for your time, Stephen. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that chat as much as we did. It's always great to catch up with Stephen. One of the big things that I took away from our conversation was how he referenced the BBC methodology. And that is, of course, to inform, educate and entertain. And I think all of us, whether in academic roles or professional roles that are in the business of education, could do well to follow that. He's right when he says the more entertained we are, the more likely we are to recall the content we learned during formal development.
Yeah, you're right. I really enjoyed that challenge. I also like what he was saying about using active listening skills. And it was really obvious from the conversation that he employs these skills a lot in the work that he does. He talked about really listening to people, not judging them or criticizing them or blaming them for the choices they make, but really seeking to understand their perspective. He said to just listen and not to throw lots of advice at people, but really to seek to understand them. His style is obviously to support people to work out things for themselves rather than to tell them the answer. And I think that's something that we could really employ in the way that we support our colleagues and also our students in higher education. Well, there's lots there from that conversation that hopefully you'll be able to take away and think about. If you'd like to take your thinking further, we've added some resources to the website on a specific podcast reading list, which you can access at liverpool.ac.uk/the-academy/podcast. Also, do let us know what you thought about the podcast. You can tweet us at Live Uni Academy, and you can also find us at eLearnerMatt or at Alexandra_Owen.
And we're really grateful for those who have taken the time to either rate or review our show in your podcast provider's app. And if you are an Apple user, please do take the time to review our show, as it really will help others find us. Bye for now.